Hello and welcome. In this lecture, we will go through the steps required to install MySQL locally. Create a set of SQL scripts to initialize MySQL. Test the application running against MySQL. MySQL installation varies depending on the operating system you are using. The instructions are available on the MySQL website at the URL http://doc/refman/yen/installing.html. There are also various versions of MySQL: Enterprise, Cluster, and Community Edition. The first two versions are commercial, whereas the Community Edition is free, and this is the one you should be installing on your PC. You might also want to install the MySQL utilities, which provide a collection of command line utilities for maintaining and administering MySQL. You will also want to install a MySQL client to interact with your database through a user interface. I'm using Mac and I've installed SQL Pro. There are tons of free MySQL clients for all sorts of operating systems. Just Google for them and install the one you want. By the end of the installation, you should be able to log in to your MySQL database as root. Now, you will need to create a new schema named DevOps Buddy and a new user with the same name. The DevOps Buddy user should have full access to the DevOps Buddy schema. Before moving on with this video, please ensure that you can connect to the DevOps Buddy schema with the DevOps Buddy username. Now, we will add the Spring JDBC connection properties for the MySQL database to the application prod.properties file. I'm now going to copy the properties that I've prepared for this lecture and then I'll talk you through it. Please pause the video and make sure that your properties look exactly like mine before moving on. MySQL by default runs on port 3306, although you can change port during setup. The database connection URL point to localhost on port 3306 at the schema DevOps Buddy. Then we enter the username and password. Next, we enter the name of the MySQL JDBC driver class and we instruct the client not to run with SSL. We will now create a new feature branch named MySQL. First, we ensure that we are pointing at the develop branch with the git command git checkout develop. Then, we will create a new MySQL feature branch with the git commands git checkout -b MySQL, git push -u origin MySQL. Now, we will need to make few changes to our application so that we use the H2 database when running with the Spring Dev profile and the MySQL database when running with the prod profile. Please note that running with H2 and MySQL is different. Whereas with H2 the database is recreated at each startup, with MySQL the database is persistent. This means that we have to cope with duplicate users. The first thing we'll do is to add the MySQL JDBC connector dependency to the POM file. The group ID is MySQL and the artifact ID is MySQL connector Java. The version is not required as it's managed by Spring Boot. Next, we will open the user repository class and add a transactional annotation to the update user password. I found we need this while running the tests against the MySQL database. MySQL was complaining that the operation was read-only despite the @modifying annotation. Adding the @transactional annotation to the method resolved this issue. Next, we will open the user service class and ensure that we check if a user already exists before creating one. We create a new local user variable and assign to it the value of user repository find by email. If the return value is not null, it means the user already exists. Therefore, we don't do anything and return the value of local user. If the return value is null, we proceed as before by creating the user. We want to ensure that we assign the return value from user repository save to the variable local user. Finally, we will create the MySQL database through a script. I'm going to attach this script to the resources for this lecture. You can create a SQL folder under source main resources and place the script there. Then you'll need some sort of MySQL client to run this SQL script against the DevOps Buddy database. If you are running IntelliJ Ultimate, by opening the SQL script in the editor, it will give you options to set up a database connection to MySQL. The script first drops all tables and then recreates them. Finally, it creates what are normally referred to as reference data, that is, plants and roles. The script is repeatable, which means that if you need to reset your database, you can just run it as many times as you want. Make sure that you can run the MySQL script multiple times before moving on. Next, we will need to slightly modify the update user password in the user service class. At the moment, when we update a user's password after the Forgot My Password journey, we don't clean up the records for that user in the password reset token table. To do so, we need to auto-wire a password reset token repository. Then, in the update user password method, after updating the password, we invoke the password reset token repository findAllByUserID method and pass the result to password reset token repository delete method that accepts an iterable as argument. Now we can test our application against a MySQL database. Modify the profile in the application properties file to prod and then start the application. Now try to log in into the application with the admin user created as startup and try creating a new pro account user. You can also try the Forgot My Password journey. Everything should work fine. Congratulations! You now have set up MySQL for the DevOps Buddy application and tested that it runs fine against it. Now we need to close the Git flow workflow by first pushing the local changes remotely with the Git commands git add *, git commit -m, added support for MySQL, and git push. Then, we will merge the changes to the develop branch with the git commands git checkout develop, git merge MySQL, and finally git push. In the next lecture, we will introduce Amazon Web Services and the services that we will be using for the DevOps Buddy application. Thank you for your time, and I see you in the next lecture.